Stephen Paddock's killing spree on October 1st was the deadliest one-man shooting in the history of this country. 58 people were killed. He died as well. It's a tragedy that demands answers, but instead questions have only piled up. Why have we heard nothing more about Mary Lou Danley, for example, his girlfriend, Paddock's girlfriend, even though police say she may be hiding something? Where was Vegas's 40-member SWAT team as Paddock went on his rampage? For ourselves, we have asked why Las Vegas police have repeatedly obstructed our questions or been outright hostile to us. Weeks ago, they refused to provide answers to basic questions about security guard Jesus Campos, the one who took off for Mexico right after the shooting. Today, they made it impossible for us to get a filming permit on public land. Why is that? We have no idea, but it tells you something interesting. Catherine Lombardo is an attorney representing many of the shooting victims here in Las Vegas. Doug Papa is a former police officer and casino security expert, and they join us both tonight. Thank you both for coming on.
Thanks, Tucker.
So, Doug, give me the overview here. We were talking in the break. We have compiled a list, my producers and I, of questions to which we have no answers. Very basic questions. I won't repeat them on the air, but basically we know basically nothing.
That's true.
Why?
I don't have any idea. It was one of the reasons why I started writing the stories right after the incident for the Baltimore Post-Examiner. I wrote 35 stories to date and try to get some answers from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. And every time you called up the PIO, initially they're either very rude or they just say, they comment that it's an ongoing investigation and they can't talk. I had some specific things that really bothered me from the start. One is where was the 40-member SWAT team the night of the worst mass shooting in American history? And
let's start right there. What's the answer to that?
Nobody knows, and actually nobody actually asked the question to Sheriff Lombardo to this day. I was the only one that wrote these in the stories. I do not know where they were. I do know from doing my investigation and talking to sources within and outside the Metropolitan Police Department that Levi Hancock, who was the officer that breached the door with explosives, went in with an ad hoc team of 2 canine officers and I believe that Donaldson was the gang unit detective. And he was a little concerned about his safety from what I was told because he was going in with people he'd never worked with before. His SWAT team members weren't anywhere in sight. That's one of the things I raised, one of the issues I raised in the story. I do not know.
And that's, you can add that to a long list of things we don't know. So I think a basic question I've had from the beginning, and I haven't heard it addressed, is did Stephen Paddock come to the attention of authorities, federal, state, or local, before this shooting? And I'm not alleging a conspiracy, but it's a basic question. Did they know who this guy was? Do you know the answer to that?
I don't know the answer, but I suspect the answer is yes, based on what I've heard. Listen, I can't remember what's rumor, what's conspiracy theory, and what's facts on some days, but I've heard a lot of things. I've actually received a lot of information on paper. Yeah, I think they knew who he was. Of course they knew who he was.
So answer that even more basic question. You're handling the legal end of this. Where's the information coming from? The FBI have apparently taken over the bulk of the investigation. Is there a central source for known facts about what happened, or is it just ad hoc?
There is no source right now at all for any information as to what happened. Like I've said from the beginning, we expect it to take 4 to 6 months for the investigation. Look, I've said from the beginning that the lawyers for MGM and the corporate executives have been hunkered down in a room from day one, moment one, and they are putting all of their resources to protection of themselves, defending themselves.
That's it right there. Look, I don't know the answer to any of these questions, but I know lying when I see it. I can smell it, and there's a lot of it around this story. I suspect that, I'm not alleging a cover-up, I don't think it's as simple as that, but that the authorities are trying to cloak their incompetence from the public. Do you have evidence that that's true?
Well, one of the things I picked up on the stories I did a story on was that I was told through sources inside and outside the police department, and I verified it, was that the homicide division early on was pulled off this case. Now, homicide detectives normally investigate homicides and suicides because you don't know if a suicide is actually a homicide until it's investigated.
Right.
They were pulled off the case, and the case was given to an entirely different bureau commander. It answers to something to the public accountability section. Now, the captain of that force investigation team that's investigating the Paddock shooting, and I was told this by the homicide unit of the LVMPD, the captain who oversees that bureau is Captain Kelly McMahill, who's the wife of the #2 guy running the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, Under Sheriff Kevin McMahill. Seems a little bit bizarre to me. When I I tried to get some answers from Metro Police to find out why the Homicide Division was pulled off and it was given to the Force Investigating Team. And you got to understand something. The Force Investigation Team for Metro investigates officer-involved shootings and police officer use of force. I could not get any answer.
Right. Well, that's the story of this whole thing. So Catherine, let me ask you just a couple of really simple questions that I've been wondering about. From the very beginning, we heard about bump stocks. That was kind of the signature piece of hardware from this atrocity, the bump stock. And yet the photographs of the rifles in the room that were publicly disseminated had bipods on them. And anyone who's ever operated a bump stock or understands how it works can tell you you can't operate a rifle with a bump stock if it's got a bipod because it doesn't move back and forth in the way that it needs to. Are they still saying that bump stocks were used in this? Is that still a claim?
They haven't told us, but what we suspect is that he had a complete and total arsenal upstairs in his room.
But for what purposes? And why would he have two shooting positions when only one? Just looking at it, it seems like the angles was not necessary to have two. Any insight on that?
Based on what we've heard, it was fully planned out by him. He was up there for, we think, 6 days. Now, you know that the first few days he was there, he was, I think, registered under his girlfriend's name. So he was actually there for 5 or 6 days planning this. We don't think he left the room once.
Were housekeepers ever in the room?
We don't think housekeepers were allowed in the room either. He had the do not disturb sign. So once MGM, Mandalay Bay, gives us the answers that I've requested, that we've requested through our subpoena process, you know, through the civil investigation pursuant to the lawsuit. Listen, I just received a piece of information last week. I received the special event permit from the city. And there it is in black and white, handwritten, filled out by an MGM executive for this event that happened right behind us. It wasn't Live Nation Entertainment. It was MGM, a corporate executive, who filled out the special event permit for this particular concert. So their fingerprints are all over it.
So why would, finally, Doug, why would the interior door be locked? Police said they broke through, A, and B, how in the world could an officer have fired a weapon accidentally in the room after the shooting? Is there any explanation for how that might have happened?
No. Again, I raised both those issues in my story. As far as for the door being locked, because they did breach the outer door when they went in.
Yes.
You heard that on the radio. And then when they went in after they cleared the first room, you hear them on the radio saying we have to breach the second door in 5 seconds. Now, if you're breaching the door, obviously they couldn't get in, so it was locked. And my question has always been, well, who locked that door? According to Sheriff Lombardo, Paddock committed suicide right after he fired his last round, somewhere in that time period. So who locked that door from the inside? Because it had to be locked from the inside.
It's one of many questions,
No
and
answers
I
yet.
suspect we should be here all week into next month to get answers. But we're going to continue following the story. Thank you both very much.
Thank you for covering this. My
I
clients appreciate it.
We
too.
mean it.
Thank you.
Supreme Court indulged its sweet tooth today as it considers whether bakeries may be required by the government to bake cakes for gay weddings. That case is next.